Before my journey abroad, James and I shared a profound love. Our story was well known throughout the city, and even after I left, when James began dating someone new, whispers circulated that she was merely a stand-in for me. However, what remained hidden from everyone was the dark truth. After we wed, he and his new partner conspired to end my life, believing that only my death would allow him to marry her without complications. Given a second chance at life, I resolved to sever my ties with him. Yet, he pleaded with me to stay, insisting that I was his first love and that he had only sought someone who resembled me because he couldn't bear the thought of someone like her serving drinks in a bar. He claimed she was from a humble background and needed his help, and that she would leave once I returned. As I listened to his words, it became painfully clear that he was only focused on her, with no regard for my feelings. On the day I returned, he failed to show up to welcome me home. I tried calling him repeatedly, but my calls went unanswered. Eventually, I reached out to his best friend, who informed me that everyone was at a karaoke venue celebrating Olivia's birthday. What a coincidence that my return coincided with her special day. Curiosity drove me to the KTV, eager to see what made her so captivating that James forgot to greet me. As I entered, the sounds of Happy Birthday filled the air. James was playfully smearing cake on Olivia's face while she nestled against him, surrounded by cheers from their friends. I recognized many of them. We all belonged to the same social circles, but now the attention had shifted entirely to her. I couldn't help but feel a wave of bitterness. If it weren't for James, Olivia would likely never have crossed paths with our elite group. The laughter and celebration around me were deafening, and I realized that if I remained silent, no one would even notice my presence at the door. James and Olivia were lost in their own world, their intimacy palpable as she playfully scolded him for being so bold. My heart ached, feeling as though it was being pierced by 1,000 needles. I managed to utter a sarcastic comment, suggesting that perhaps they should maintain some distance. At the sound of my voice, James turned, surprise and guilt flashing across his face. "Isabella, you're back," he exclaimed, clearly caught off guard. "Didn't I send you a message?" I replied, noting his bewilderment. Before he could respond, Olivia chimed in, introducing herself and claiming that James had organized the celebration to make up for all the birthdays she had missed. She gestured to a pile of gifts, asserting that they were all from James, meant to cover her past birthdays. I maintained a calm demeanor and asked James if he had received my message. Olivia, sensing the tension, quickly fabricated an excuse, claiming she had replied on his behalf and deleted our conversation out of fear that the party would be cancelled. Her act was convincing. Tears welled in her eyes as she apologized profusely, and James comforted her, insisting that her insecurities were understandable given her past. They seemed so connected, so protective of each other, while I felt like an unwanted specter in their midst. What had they been doing while I was yearning for James? I had isolated myself, but he had been out enjoying life, attempting to reach me but continually being turned away. He even sent his mother to invite me for dinner, a gesture steeped in the history of our family's friendship. It was all too much to bear. It wasn't a big deal if the kids had an argument, but when it came to the parents, I had to leave. She mentioned that everyone was aware of the marriage contract between James and me. The James family wielded more influence than the Isabella family. If James were to annul the contract, I feared that no noble young man would consider marrying me. It seemed inevitable that I would end up marrying him. Tears streamed down my cheeks. How could a man's feelings change so swiftly? If I returned, he would still care for me, but if I went abroad, he might fall for someone else. I understood that he didn't necessarily need me. I was fully aware of that. Yet, I couldn't bring myself to accept it. I didn't mind if Olivia captured James's affection, but she must never threaten my position. The one who marries into the James family simply cannot be her, Olivia. I gazed out the car window as memories of James and me flooded my mind. My vision blurred as tears filled my eyes. James was waiting for me at the entrance, opening the car door and taking my hand as we walked into the James family home. He pulled a small box from his pocket and handed it to me. "Open it and see," he said. Inside was a beautiful jade ring. Leaning against my shoulder, he said, "Isabella, you mentioned you liked this before you left for abroad, so I bought it at an auction." Surprised, I looked at him, and he grinned sheepishly. "I've always remembered your words. So, Isabella, please don't cry anymore, all right?" As he spoke, he gently wiped away my tears. "You don't look good when you cry. If you get ugly, I might not want to marry you anymore, you know?" I couldn't help but laugh and playfully teased him. "You're the ugly one." He accepted my playful hits with a smile. All right, I'm ugly," he conceded. In that moment, I felt the warmth of our past affection wash over me. Whenever I was upset, he always seemed to notice my feelings. At dinner, while everyone chatted animatedly, James sat silently, fixated on his phone and barely touched his food. I called his name several times, but he didn't respond. Noticing my mood, James's mother took his phone and said, "Isabella is trying to get your attention." James looked surprised, not fully understanding what his mother meant. He took back his phone and apologized. "Sorry, Mom. I need to step out for a bit. I'll be back soon." He didn't consult me or even glance my way during the entire exchange. Hours passed, and he promised to return soon, but night fell and he still hadn't come back. Rumors about James and Olivia's connection spread like wildfire. People remarked how absurd it was that his first love couldn't compete with a newcomer. Once James and I were seen as the ideal couple in high society. Now, I was merely the talk of the town. Chloe called saying, "This Olivia is something else. She threw a birthday party while you were away. James was trying to make amends with you, but then she started crying, claiming she wanted to return to her job at the bar. She said she wouldn't adjust her behavior to suit you anymore." Can you believe that? I remained silent, engrossed in the novel I held. The protagonist stood on a rooftop, while the male lead tried to comfort her and coax her down. She felt like a mere substitute for the first love, convinced that he didn't truly love her. Yet, the male lead insisted that from the moment he saw her, it was her he had feelings for, not the first love. Ultimately, they ended up together, while the first love became the antagonist in their story, rejected by all. Chloe's voice broke through my thoughts. "Isabella, say something. I swear I'll fly back to see you right now." I closed the book with a sigh. "Don't worry, Chloe. When have I, Isabella, ever let anyone walk all over me? In terms of family and looks, Olivia can't hold a candle to me. Even if she resembles me, a fake will always be a fake." James sent me a voice message to apologize, inviting me to the peach orchard filled with blossoms I adored. He mentioned he would bring Olivia along to apologize. When James arrived, I was by the pond, feeding the fish. He approached and asked, "Does Isabella like goldfish? How about we create a pond in the James family's yard after our wedding?" I turned to him with a smile and replied, "Sure." I noticed Olivia standing behind him, unable to contain herself. I wanted to demonstrate that even if James had feelings for her, he would still need to respect me. Seeing my calm demeanor, James pulled Olivia closer. "Olivia, please apologize to Isabella." She broke free from his grasp, tears streaming down her face. "I'll head back to the bar today. I won't interrupt you two any longer." James looked anxious as he held her arm. "Didn't we agree on this?" Olivia cried so heartbreakingly that I almost felt sympathy for her. "I'd rather go to the bar than stay here and watch you two be so affectionate," she said. "James, you know how I feel. I just want someone who truly cares for me." I didn't provoke her, "Yet you expect me to apologize," she continued. "I might as well go back to the bar. At my very first birthday party, she had come to assert her dominance over me. That was my first celebration, and it was painful. You wealthy people have no idea how difficult life can be for those of us who struggle." She truly painted me as the villain in this story. In my previous life, I was submissive. After marrying into the James family, Olivia claimed she was pregnant with James' child, asserting that he had always loved her and that he would poison me after I gave birth. The shock left me reeling, and I collapsed, ultimately losing both my life and the child. I glanced at the delicate girl before me and impulsively pushed her into the pond, jumping in right after her. I pretended to struggle, testing whether James would come to my rescue. As my vision blurred, I feared he wouldn't. I reached out, trying to swim to the surface, but I was too weak. In the midst of the chaos, someone pulled me up, though I couldn't make out who it was. When I regained consciousness, I saw James embracing Olivia. Her voice was faint. "James, I didn't expect you to choose me." He gently stroked her hair. "Silly girl, I knew you couldn't swim. Of course I would save you. You've always been my priority." When I woke again, I found myself in my room, staring at the ceiling. James had often told me his affection for Olivia was merely because she resembled me, insisting that I was the one he truly loved and wanted to marry. I believed him. Eventually, I stopped concerning myself with the connection between Olivia and James. On my wedding day, I was ecstatic to finally unite with the man I had always adored. We shared tender moments together, and soon after, I found out I was pregnant. However, after our marriage, James began to reveal his true nature. He would openly show affection to Olivia in front of me, dismissing my feelings with, "We just kissed." "Are you really that upset?" Olivia had insulted me, and when I slapped her, James retaliated, pushing me to the ground. She only said a few words. "Do you really need to react like this? Where's your decorum?" At social gatherings, we were the couple everyone envied. He was charming and considerate, but at home, I felt like a puppet, constrained in my emotions. Eventually, Olivia revealed she had a 1-year-old daughter. I collapsed, looking up at James with desperation. "Please save me and our child." I saw a toddler behind him, and words failed me. James forced medicine into my mouth, and I lacked the strength to resist. "Be a good girl, Isabella. Drink this, and it won't hurt. Only when you're gone can this secret be kept." I gazed at him in despair until my vision faded. Why did the pain from that moment still haunt me? Tears streamed down my face as I clutched my chest. I remembered everything. I didn't want to compete or fight anymore. I refused to repeat past mistakes. James was a monster. I would rather die than marry him again. Olivia had the looks he desired, a family that elicited his sympathy, and she could charm him effortlessly. But I was nothing, and I didn't have to marry James. I wept as I embraced my mother. "I won't marry James. I'd rather die than go through with it." My mother thought this was just another quarrel that would blow over, but I was serious. I had pretended to leap from buildings, drown myself, and hurt myself in front of them. After my frequent fake suicide attempts, my father and mother finally understood my determination. The news of my fake suicide attempts spread like wildfire, and the James family was no exception. James' mother invited me to have dinner at the James family's house. I consented to the situation. Before I could step inside, James approached me with a threatening tone. "Isabella, just because Olivia said a few things to you, did you really have to push her?" James' mother ushered me into their home. As soon as I took a seat, he continued with his aggressive demeanor. "Do you realize that your threats of self-harm led Olivia's mother to ask her to leave my house? Do you have any idea how pathetic Olivia is feeling right now?" The meal in front of me felt almost impossible to swallow. I simply nodded in response. Noticing my lack of concern, his anger intensified. "Since you acknowledge it, don't you think you deserve some punishment?" I met his gaze and smiled. "And what kind of punishment do you have in mind? Should I let her push me too? Then you can swoop in to save me while putting her life at risk? If we're talking about fairness, should I also find a replacement and be with them every day?" Pushed to his breaking point, James slapped me without hesitation. "How could you even think like that? Haven't I treated you well enough?" I covered my face and looked at him in despair. "What about me? Haven't I treated you well? Was I not good enough for you?" The atmosphere grew heavy with tension. James' mother intervened, saying, "All right, let's put the past behind us. You two still have a future together. Don't let this Olivia situation ruin everything." I stood up, removed the jade ring from my finger, and tossed it to the ground, shattering it. Just like my irreparable bond with James. He tried to catch it, but it was too late. It lay in pieces. He knelt down to gather the shards. "What are you doing?" I didn't respond to him but instead addressed James' mother. "My engagement to James is over. Mrs. James, we share a similar fate, don't we? I trust you'll support my decision." James followed me as I made my way to the car. Just before I got in he asked, "Isabella, do you regret this?" I interrupted him. "No, I don't regret it. I will never regret it." As expected, news of my broken engagement spread quickly through the elite circles. Chloe informed me that James had issued a warning in their social group. Anyone who dared to pursue me would be considered an enemy of the James family. I feigned ignorance, only to discover that he had removed me from the group chat. During this time, many from the aristocracy were getting married. My mother looked at me with concern. "Tell me, because of your outburst, should I attend the wedding invitations I receive?" I was engrossed in a novel titled Crossing My Legs. "Go ahead," I replied. "Maybe you'll find someone for me." My mother shot me a sideways glance. I think I should set up some blind dates for you instead. She began spreading the word about my upcoming blind dates. I couldn't shake the suspicion that she was behind the previous rumors as well. Later that afternoon, someone visited the Isabella household, claiming to be looking for me. My mother greeted him warmly. "William, it's been ages. You've grown so much since I last held you as a child." Feeling a bit overwhelmed, I excused my mother. I sized him up. He was even more handsome than James. I extended my hand. "Hello, I'm Isabella. How can I help you?" He shook my hand and smiled. "Hi, I'm William, Chloe's brother." Chloe was worried I wouldn't find anyone, so she thought to introduce us. He continued, "My brother seems to have had a crush on you for a while. You were in the same class in high school, but you only had eyes for James back then, so it's understandable you didn't notice him. He would hide upstairs whenever you visited, afraid you'd see his feelings and reject him. He just returned from studying abroad, and I had to encourage him a lot before he felt brave enough to come meet you. Good luck, sweetie. I'm rooting for you," he added. After listening to Chloe's voice message, I felt a mix of emotions. The next day, William returned to the Isabella home, asking if I'd like to go hiking. My mother eagerly agreed on my behalf without consulting me. This time, I wasn't as cold as before. I was much more approachable. He was very considerate, wiping my sweat, offering me water, and suggesting breaks when he noticed I was tired. I laughed at his attentiveness, and when he saw me smile, he laughed too. Over the next 3 months, William visited almost daily. Since he learned I loved jasmine flowers, he brought me a bouquet each time he came. Beside me. Did Isabella come today because she still likes James? James raised his eyes, waiting for my answer. Failing to frame me, she now wanted to stir up trouble between William and me. My mother remarked that I seemed to be smiling more often. As the sun set, we strolled hand in hand along the shore. I tilted my head, beaming at him. "Chloe mentioned that you liked me a long time ago?" He appeared a bit bashful, scratching his head and nodding. I found his demeanor quite amusing. He reached out, pulling me into his embrace. We were very close, and I could distinctly feel his breath. He carried the jasmine scent that I adored. It was intoxicating. "I like you, Isabella," he confessed. After William revealed his feelings, he seemed transformed. He insisted on kissing me every single day. The more I hesitated, the more passionately he would kiss me. I playfully pushed against his chest, teasingly saying, "I thought you were so gentle." It turned out it was all just an act. He smiled and didn't resist. How else could I fit in? Glancing at him, I asked, "Aren't you worried about upsetting James?" "Not at all," he replied. I realized that while I was developing feelings for someone else, there was someone who liked me too. I now wish I had discovered William's feelings sooner. During lunch, a servant accidentally spilled soup on William. My mother suggested he wear my father's short-sleeved shirt for the time being. After changing, it was clear that William felt uneasy. Once lunch was over, I asked him, "Is Dad's shirt not fitting well?" He shook his head, insisting that wasn't the issue. After his change, he kept covering his arm. Now that I think about it, he had never shown his wrist before. I tried to pry his hand away, but this time he resisted. "Let go of your hand," I said. Seeing my annoyance, he complied. There on his arm was a deep scar. I reached out to touch it, looking at him with curiosity. "Why didn't you want me to see this?" I asked. He looked down and replied softly, "It's ugly. I was afraid it would frighten you." I remembered that scar. The day I fell into the water with Olivia, I had seen the same scar on the arm that reached out to me. My eyes filled with tears. Why hadn't he mentioned it? I cupped his face and smiled. "William, marry me." News of our relationship spread quickly. I wasn't sure if my mother had a hand in it. When James found out, he confronted William outside my house, leading to a fierce fight. Neither of them gained the upper hand. Both ended up bruised and battered. I had to intervene. "James, have you had enough?" James stood, looking at me with a dark expression. "Isabella, don't you have any sense of decency? How could you move on to someone else so quickly?" I helped William to his feet and calmly replied, "He's a bit worse off than you. You should head back. Olivia is waiting for you." "Isabella, you will regret this," he warned. Ignoring him, I walked straight home, determined that I would never regret my choice. After that incident, rumors began to circulate. Some true, others not. People claimed I was heartless, suggesting that after losing me, he realized that no one could replace his first love. The truth boiled down to one simple fact. He wanted it all. That night, William was intoxicated. He called out to me, resting his head on my shoulder. "Did you choose me today just to make him mad?" I felt a mix of anger and amusement. "What do you think?" I replied. He shook his head against my shoulder, admitting he didn't know. Yet, he insisted that even if it were true, it didn't matter to him. He was willing to accept it. James invited me to his birthday celebration, and I agreed, wanting to confirm something. I attended with William. Upon arrival, I saw Olivia clinging to James, her belly slightly protruding. It appeared she was indeed pregnant before James and I tied the knot. It was absurd. Even though I suspected it, I needed confirmation. When James spotted me, he pulled away from Olivia and approached. "Isabella, I knew you would come." Before I could respond, Olivia interrupted. "Sister Isabella, I'm afraid you don't know yet. James and I are getting married soon." She declared it with pride, as if marrying James was a tremendous achievement. Well, every duck aspires to be a swan, after all. I walked past Olivia, offering a faint smile. "Congratulations." As soon as I spoke, I heard Olivia scream. "James, don't blame Sister Isabella. I lost my balance. It's all my fault." "Please don't be angry with Sister," Olivia said. James replied in a flat tone. "Okay. Be more careful next time." Olivia was slightly taken aback. Then she looked at William beside me. "Did Isabella come today because she still likes James?" James raised his eyes, waiting for my answer. Failing to frame me, she now wanted to stir up trouble between William and me. I wouldn't allow her to triumph. I grasped William's hand. "Apologies, but William and I are also set to marry soon." James looked taken aback. He slowly replied, "Isabella, you don't need to rush into marriage just to provoke me. It's utterly absurd. I'm not that desperate." I chose to ignore him and turned my attention to Olivia instead. Raising my voice intentionally, I said, "Olivia, my dear little sister, please be cautious next time. The floor is chilly. You wouldn't want to harm the baby you're carrying." James appeared momentarily stunned, glancing at Olivia. Olivia's expression was one of shock. She hadn't realized how I had found out. I offered a gentle smile. "Congratulations to both of you. Wishing you a wonderful son soon." When James' mother heard the news, she invited me to a cafe. James' biological mother wasn't the woman who raised him. He was the product of an affair involving his father. That woman even attempted to take the place of James' mother simply because of a child. Sadly, in aristocratic circles, people often prioritize family background over anything else. James' mother was compassionate. She pleaded with James' father to keep the child. As for that other woman, James' father gave her some money and sent her away. I sat across from James' mother. "Mrs. James, what did you wish to discuss with me?" James' mother began, looking somewhat regretful. "It's our James's fault that Olivia is expecting." I offered a faint smile. "Mrs. James, I no longer have any contact with James. His actions are no longer my concern. James is quite ungrateful." I felt compelled to caution her about James. "Mrs. James, I'm merely trying to be kind. It might be wise to focus on your own biological child first. Neither James' looks nor his character resemble that of his father." I could only suggest this subtly. Whether she grasped the implication was up to her. James was not his father's biological son. After marrying, James discovered he wasn't part of the James family lineage. He then allied with Olivia to scheme against his father and mother. It's absurd that James' father had always intended for him to be the heir. On the day William and I wed, news broke about a fight between James and Olivia. Reports indicated that James had been at a bar that night and returned to Olivia very late. He had consumed a great deal of wine and kept insisting on reconciling with me, repeating my name over and over. If Olivia hadn't intervened, he might have tried to disrupt the wedding. In the bridal chamber, I felt somewhat distracted. William noticed and took my hand. "Are you thinking about James?" I scoffed. "We agreed not to bring him up again." He cupped my face. Then let's focus on us. What? Before I could finish, William kissed me. I must admit, his kissing skills were impressive. I began to suspect he wasn't truthful when he claimed he had never been in a relationship. The next morning, Chloe called me. I could laugh about James's situation for an entire year. I should have gone to see him yesterday. I lay in bed, laughing heartily without holding back. Before I could enjoy it for too long, my mother came in to tell me that James was outside, wanting to see me. She also mentioned he wouldn't leave until I came out. James's appearance created quite a commotion. A crowd gathered at my front gate. Feeling the pressure, I reluctantly agreed to step outside. As I opened the door, James approached me with a look of joy. I took a step back to maintain some distance. He didn't seem bothered. Isabella, I know I made a mistake. Ever since I found out about your marriage, I haven't slept well at all. All I can think about are the small moments we once shared. I calmly addressed him, young Master James. You must remember that I am already married. Please have some self-respect and refrain from visiting me again. With that, I entered the house, not daring to look back. The mere sight of him filled me with disgust. Now the entire aristocratic society is aware of James's infatuation with me, and I find myself once more cast as the cold-hearted and ruthless female antagonist. This only highlights Olivia's nurturing and considerate nature. James truly acts like a haunting specter, intent on dragging me down with him. That particular night, when James came to see me, William had indulged in some drinks. I couldn't help but chuckle at his flushed cheeks. In his inebriated state, he asked if I genuinely had feelings for him. I felt a mix of frustration and amusement. We are already married, yet he still doubts my affection for him. He insisted he was aware of my true feelings and declared that he would no longer allow James to interfere with our lives. Olivia hasn't even solidified her position as Mrs. James yet, finding herself back at square one, much like an awkward duckling. James is in a similar predicament. Someone had anonymously informed James's father that he might not be his biological son. Given James's recent antics, his father had already grown weary of him. Various incidents had tarnished the James family's reputation. After investigation, it was confirmed that James was not related to them by blood. It turned out that the paternity test James's mother presented was fabricated. She had sought to enter the James family by claiming to be pregnant that night, but she had not been. James's mother heeded my advice and chose not to plead for him. On that same day, Olivia and James approached me, seeking mercy. Olivia knelt before me, her belly noticeably larger than before. The shyness she once displayed had been replaced by a more hardened expression. "Sister Isabella, please, can you help us?" she begged. "Your families have been friends for generations. Surely you can assist us. Or perhaps you could provide some financial support." She resembled a desperate woman, kneeling and tugging at my dress. James, in a daze, pointed at William. "Isabella, you love me, don't you? He's just a pawn you're using to provoke me, right?" As he spoke, he lunged towards me. "Isabella, please help me. My father cares for me deeply. He wouldn't want to see me like this. I promise to be with you." Startled by his sudden movement, I took a step back, and someone behind me caught me. I turned to see it was William. He enveloped me in his embrace, whispering comforting words, "Don't be afraid. I'm here." William took my arm and guided me away, calling for security to escort James and Olivia out. Even as they were led away, James continued to insist, "Isabella, I know you love me." Chloe mentioned that James's father, unable to completely disregard him, sent both him and Olivia to a mental health facility. With Olivia's mental state deteriorating, she lost the child. After that day, William took me to a remote village, assuring me that there were no rumors or gossip here, allowing me to be myself. We lived like a typical couple, and the neighbors welcomed me warmly, often sewing beautiful clothes and preparing delicious meals for me. One day, as I savored snacks made by a kind old lady while engrossed in a novel, someone suddenly covered my eyes. A familiar voice asked playfully, "Guess who I am?" I smiled and replied, "William." He stood there with a bouquet of flowers, just as he always did, bringing me jasmine blooms every time he returned. He picked me up and pressed his lips against mine. "Honey, don't you think it's time we started a family?" After my father passed away from cancer, he left behind a mountain of debts. My mother never remarried, and I sacrificed my chance to attend university to work hard and help her pay off those debts. One day, while at an amusement park, my mother and I spotted my father, who we thought was dead, playing with his first love and their child. It turned out that he had faked his own death to run away with someone else. My mother was so distraught that she wished to join him in death. Instead, she ended up being killed by my father and his first love, and I lost my life alongside hers. When I regained consciousness, I found myself back on the day my father pretended to die. After the doctor announced my father's death, my mother collapsed, weeping on the ground. I remained calm, focusing intently on Sebastian, the doctor who had treated my father. At that moment, he looked at me with a sorrowful expression and said, "Please accept my condolences. The deceased cannot be brought back to life. You need to start making funeral arrangements." "But Sebastian, my father was fine yesterday. How could he have died today?" I exclaimed. Sebastian appeared taken aback by my outburst but quickly responded, "Cancer can act like a ticking time bomb. It's not uncommon for patients to pass away unexpectedly. Besides, there are hospital reports confirming this." From his words and demeanor, I became convinced that he was complicit in my father's deception. In my past life, because my father had staged his death, he left behind a significant burden of debt for my mother and me. We worked tirelessly for 10 years to settle those debts. However, on the day we finally cleared them, we discovered at the amusement park that my father was alive and well, having eloped with his first love. They even had a child and had been living a carefree life for the past decade while my mother and I struggled to make ends meet. In the end, we were betrayed and lost our lives at their hands. I felt an overwhelming hatred. I loathed them deeply. In this lifetime, I wouldn't allow anyone who had wronged my mother and me to escape justice. Just wait and see. I refused to believe that my father had died so suddenly. Something was definitely amiss. I raised my voice, drawing the attention of others in the room. Sebastian's face went pale. "Don't speak nonsense. We have a death certificate, and your father is still in the morgue. You can go check for yourself." My mother, wiping her tears, tried to comfort me, saying, "Lila, your father has passed. I know you're heartbroken, but we need to stay reasonable. I've seen the reports. Your father did die of cancer." How I wished I could tell my mother that I felt no sadness at all, but it wasn't the right moment. "Mom, how can you be so sure those reports aren't falsified?" I asked. I refused to believe my father died from cancer. It has to be a medical error. "I'm calling the police for an autopsy." As soon as I said this, Sebastian's expression turned to one of panic, and he gritted his teeth. "Young lady, don't say such things. We are a top-tier hospital. There are no medical errors here." "Is that so?" I challenged him. "If you're truly a top-tier hospital, you should have nothing to fear from an autopsy." With that, I pulled out my phone, ready to call the authorities. Sebastian, clearly frightened, snatched my phone away. "You can't call the police." "Wow, you seem awfully flustered," I remarked, raising an eyebrow.
"Can't I call the police?" "Sebastian, since you're so afraid of us calling the police, I have even more reason to suspect that there was a medical accident." When my mother heard this, she also seemed to think it made sense. "Lila is right. You're so flustered. There must be something wrong. I'll call the police right away." With that, my mother took out her cell phone and called the police. Sebastian tried to stop her but failed. I was really curious about how they would continue to fabricate this lie after I applied for an autopsy. The police station was close to the hospital, and the police arrived quickly. After I briefly explained the whole story, the police said that we had the right to apply for an autopsy and took out a form for our family members to sign for consent. Sebastian beside us had a flustered look in his eyes, sweat broke out on his forehead, and he was still trying to defend himself. "Officer, I'm a professional doctor. It's impossible for me to have a medical accident." The officer patted him on the shoulder. "It's okay. The truth will come out after the autopsy." As soon as this sentence was said, Sebastian's face looked even worse. My mother was beside us wiping her tears, her voice choked with sobs. "Thank you, officer. Please help us find out the truth. I can't let my husband die without knowing the reason." My mother loved my father deeply and had been devoting herself to him all her life. It was said that after getting married, she was like a lovesick puppy and treated my father extremely well. So in the previous life, when she found out that the man she loved deeply had been deceiving her all along, she couldn't accept it and wanted to die with him. The forensic doctor took us to the morgue, then put on a mask and took the toolbox, ready to go inside. I was secretly happy in my heart and really wanted to see how my father could continue to fake it later. Don't go in. Sebastian suddenly rushed over and blocked the forensic doctor. The forensic doctor frowned. Please don't interfere with my work. Sebastian stammered, I'm sorry. I just think it's not good to dissect the deceased so soon after his death. Sebastian, our family members haven't said anything. Why are you so nervous? I don't agree to the autopsy. Before I could finish my words, I was interrupted by an angry voice. Looking back, it turned out to be my grandmother, and beside her was a woman with a bright and beautiful appearance holding her arm. I took a step back in fright. Because I recognized at a glance that she was Hannah, my father's first love who eloped with him in the previous life. Amelia, do you want to be in charge while I'm still alive, an old woman? Grandma glared at Mom angrily. Mom pulled me behind her and said with her head down, I'm sorry, Mom. The situation is really urgent. We suspect that Nathaniel's death was due to a medical accident. Sister-in-law, this is a top-tier hospital, and the attending doctor is my friend. His medical skills are among the best in the whole Jiangcheng. How could there be a medical accident? Hannah suddenly spoke up, staring closely at my mother and me, without a trace of kindness in her eyes. All right, you brought Grandma here to stop me from having the autopsy, huh? I pushed Mom aside and said directly to Grandma, Grandma, there's definitely something wrong with Sebastian. Just now when I proposed the autopsy, he was all flustered. And this aunt said that Sebastian is her friend. I think they're in cahoots. You don't want Dad to die without knowing the reason either. Having an autopsy will reveal the truth. Damn girl, what nonsense are you talking? I'm your father's childhood sweetheart and we have a deep bond. How could I harm him? Hannah scolded me angrily. Grandma wasn't moved by my words either and still had that angry look on her face. You heartless little beast. Your father is already dead, yet you still want to dissect him and not let him have an intact body. I'll make it clear here today. My son must be buried intact. With that, she even tried to hit me with her cane. Fortunately, I reacted quickly and dodged it. Mom hurried forward to explain for me, Mom, Lila didn't mean it that way. She just thinks there's something wrong with her father's death. Grandma didn't listen to Mom's explanation at all and just stuck to one sentence, no autopsy. Seeing the flash of a smug look in Hannah's eyes, I suddenly realized something. Grandma had been speaking up for her all along. So did Grandma also know that Dad faked his death? Thinking back to my previous life, right after Dad passed away, Grandma happened to be sent abroad for treatment due to illness and never came back. So the whole family was in on the deception against my mother and me, right? I pulled Mom over. It's okay, Mom. If Grandma doesn't agree to the autopsy, then forget it. Maybe I really misunderstood Sebastian. Hearing this, Sebastian's tense expression relaxed a lot. Little girl, it's best that you think like this. I couldn't have harmed your father. I ignored him and just looked at Grandma. Grandma, I heard you just say that you want Dad to be buried intact. I think that makes sense too. Then let's take Dad back to our hometown and bury him with his whole body. As soon as I said this, the faces of Grandma and Hannah turned pale at the same time. No, no way. Grandma immediately refused. I stared at her with sharp eyes. Grandma, don't you want Dad to be buried intact? But you just said, enough. Hannah suddenly interrupted me and then said to Grandma, Lila's words aren't without reason. Then let's take Brother Nathaniel's body back to our hometown and bury it. We took Dad's body away. All the way, I insisted on staying with Dad's body and riding in the same car with him. No one could persuade me otherwise, so they just let me be. It was just that after seeing me get in the car, Hannah was so angry that she almost gritted her teeth to pieces. I knew that she definitely wanted to let Dad get out of the car on the way. But how could I give her that chance? She might be smart, but I'm not stupid either. Looking at Dad lying beside me, he had his eyes tightly closed and his face was pale, looking just like he was dead. But I clearly saw that he was breathing through his nose. Dad, just wait. I'll expose you step by step. After we got back, I said that we couldn't rush to bury him and that we should put Dad in an ice coffin and recite the Great Compassion mantra for a few days before sending him on his way peacefully. Grandma and Hannah's faces turned green when they heard this. Hannah said, we can't do this. I stared directly at her. Didn't you say that you had a deep bond with my father? Don't you want him to go on his way peacefully? I left her speechless, and she could only reluctantly follow my arrangements. Next, I watched with my own eyes as Dad was put into the ice coffin in the living room. I snickered inwardly. Dad, you're going to suffer a lot. In the middle of winter, I wonder if you're cold in there? At night, everyone fell asleep in the living room, and I also pretended to be asleep on the sofa. After a while, I heard the sound of the coffin being opened and then Hannah's worried voice, Brother Nathaniel, are you cold in there? Come out quickly. I'll put the dummy in. Dad's voice was trembling, cold, so cold. I've endured it for a whole day. That damn girl has been watching me all the time. I even suspect that she did it on purpose. I curled my lips into a smile. Dad, say a bit more. My mobile phone is recording you and Hannah. Later, I'll make the video public. Soon, it was the day of Dad's burial. I specifically started a live stream and cried bitterly in front of the camera. Today is my father's funeral. I'm really sad, but Dad liked liveliness, so I want my fans to see my father off together. Because I had posted singing videos on Douyin before and hundreds of thousands of fans were following me, so the traffic in my live stream was naturally quite high. At this time, Dad's coffin was carried over. Mom's eyes were swollen from crying beside it. However, Grandma and Hannah didn't look sad at all. Did they think that after letting Dad go, they could live a happy life and leave my mother and me to pay off the debts? Impossible. I won't trip over the same stone twice. Seeing that the coffin had just been placed in the pit, I set up my mobile phone on the ground properly. Then I rushed over and hugged the coffin, crying my heart out. Dad, I can't bear to part with you. I want to see you one last time. When Mom heard this, she cried even louder and came over to hug the coffin with me. I also want to see Nathaniel one last time. Grandma hurriedly said, he's already dead. What's the point of seeing him? Hurry up and bury him. But I refuse to let go of the coffin no matter what. No, I want to see Dad one last time. I just want to. Seeing that being tough didn't work, Hannah then tried to be gentle. She came over and pulled me. Lila, Auntie knows you're sad, but there are rules for burying the dead. Once the coffin is closed, it can't be opened again. Damn it. I really underestimated her ability. I didn't expect that she would come up with such a way to fob me off. But there are always more solutions than difficulties. I simply climbed into the pit and leaned against Dad's coffin. If you don't let me see him today, I won't let Dad be buried. Although Mom was usually a bit of a lovesick fool, she unexpectedly cooperated with me at this time. She knelt down and begged Grandma, Mom, after all, Lila and I are Nathaniel's closest relatives. Please do us a favor. Grandma looked at her coldly. No way. Come here and drag these two mother and daughter away from me. I had already guessed that this would happen. So I had contacted the reporters in advance. They should be here by now. Sure enough, the next second, a group of reporters rushed in and pointed their microphones at Grandma. It's quite normal for a daughter to be reluctant to part with her father. Excuse me, madam. Why don't you want to open the coffin? Yes. It's just a small request to see the father one last time. Aren't you willing to fulfill it? Moreover, the deceased is your son. Don't you want to see him one last time either? The reporters asked questions while filming Grandma. Grandma had never encountered such a situation before and was completely flustered. Hannah, come and help me quickly. Then the reporters surrounded Hannah. Excuse me, what's your relationship with the deceased? Why does the old lady ask for your help? Are you her daughter-in-law? Then who's that woman beside the coffin? Hannah's face stiffened. I'm a friend of the deceased. We have a rule here that the coffin can't be reopened once it's closed. Your rule? A reporter raised his voice. You're not the wife of the deceased. Why should we follow your rule? Well said. I almost couldn't help clapping my hands. Seeing that Grandma and Hannah were too busy to pay attention to my mother and me, I took the opportunity to push the coffin open. Ah, where's my father? I screamed in horror. My voice attracted everyone to the coffin. A reporter exclaimed, how did the body turn into a dummy? Oh my God. Why has the body of the deceased disappeared? Mom saw this and asked Grandma loudly, Mom, you and Hannah watched Nathaniel's body being put into the coffin. Did you see that Nathaniel's body was still there at that time? This sentence was like a bomb exploding among the crowd. The reporters frantically took pictures of Grandma losing her composure. Excuse me, madam. You didn't let your granddaughter see her own son just now. Did you already know that the body in the coffin was missing? Why did you do this? Some people also went to ask Hannah, "Madam, excuse me. Where's the real body? Or is it that this person isn't dead at all?" The last sentence made the blood drain from Hannah's face instantly. She explained in a flustered manner, "No, we don't know. I saw Nathaniel's body was still there at that time." With that, she looked around and then randomly pulled a man out. "He carried the coffin here just now. He must have changed my brother Nathaniel's body on the way." The man stammered, "Yes, it was me who changed it. I just hated Nathaniel, so I didn't want him to be buried peacefully." This statement made everyone present believe it. Even Mom believed it and rushed over to ask him where Dad's body was. But only I saw that just now Hannah had whispered something in his ear, and that's why he said those words. I have to say that Hannah was very smart and had a strong ability to adapt to unexpected situations. But in order to take revenge on them, I had made more than one preparation. I also rushed over and asked the man to hand over Dad's body. Finally, the man led us to a patch of grass. Dad was lying there with his eyes closed. The makeup on his face for a dead person looked very fresh. Obviously, it had just been put on. Dad was a butcher and usually honest and simple. I didn't expect that he was so good at scheming. I took out my mobile phone and took pictures of his face. "Family, I've finally found my father's body." The barrage was sliding crazily on the screen. Oh my god. It's the first time I've seen a body with such a ruddy complexion. If the blogger hadn't said that he passed away, I really wouldn't have believed it. Indeed. The complexion is really ruddy. Are the colors of corpses so healthy these days? At this time, Mom rushed over and hugged Dad, crying, "Nathaniel, I've finally found you." But the next second, she suddenly stopped crying. "Nathaniel, why are you still warm?" As soon as she finished speaking, Hannah suddenly went over and pulled her away. "I think you're crazy about missing your husband. How could a dead person be warm? Come here. Carry the body away first and arrange for the burial tomorrow." The next second, several men lifted Dad up, and the reporters frantically took pictures. Swift as lightning, I rushed over in one stride and hugged Dad. "Dad, your daughter misses you so much." "Dad, I'm about to expose the farce you're acting out." I reached out and tickled him at his waist. Because I knew that he was most ticklish there. Sure enough, the next second, Dad burst out laughing. "Ha ha ha, stop tickling, stop tickling." As soon as these words came out, the whole place was dead silent. "Dad, why are you still alive?" I pretended to be surprised and looked at Dad. Mom was also stunned. "Nathaniel, why can you still laugh?" The reporters immediately started taking pictures with a click click. Damn it. What a plot twist. This person isn't dead. It's sure to be on the front page tomorrow. Hurry up and take pictures. A group of people surrounded Dad. Hannah's face turned black with anger. And Grandma muttered, "I don't know anything." And then she left. I was responsible for filming this wonderful scene and showing it to netizens. Mom looked at Dad and suddenly burst into tears of joy again. "It's so good that Nathaniel isn't dead." Suddenly, I didn't want to tell Mom the reason why Dad faked his death. Because she loved Dad too much and was too much of a lovesick fool. Even if I told her about it, she wouldn't believe me. I guess only when she sees with her own eyes that Dad has betrayed her will she wake up. At this time, Dad took advantage of the chaos and escaped. My mother and I also left. After we went back, Dad's incident caused a huge stir on the internet. Everyone was speculating about what his purpose was for faking his death. And Sebastian was also dragged into this. People all said that as a doctor, how could he issue a death certificate for a living person? I looked at all this and showed a bright smile. "Dad, I'd like to see what you're going to do next." Since Dad wasn't dead, Mom was so excited that she not only cooked delicious food for him but also hugged and kissed him. "It's so nice. Our family can live a happy life again." Seeing this scene, Hannah clenched her fists tightly, with hatred in her eyes. I smiled and looked at Dad. "Dad, how did you suddenly come back to life? And is your cancer cured?" When Grandma heard this, she immediately shouted at me angrily, "Damn girl. It's already a great thing that your father isn't dead. Why are you still bringing up those unlucky things?" I tried hard to hold back my tears. "Grandma, you've misunderstood me. I just want to know if Dad was framed by someone. Otherwise, how could he be judged dead by the doctor when he wasn't dead?" When Dad heard this, he quickly said, Yes, I was framed by someone. It was the doctor's problem. At that time, I was just in a coma, but he judged me dead." Then we should call the police. No way. Hannah suddenly spoke up and looked at my dad pitifully. Brother Nathaniel, Sebastian is my friend. He definitely didn't frame you on purpose. He should have just made a misjudgment. You should write a letter of understanding and forgive him. How can that be okay? If we hadn't discovered it in time, Dad would have been buried alive. It's a human life. We can't let it go. I deliberately spoke loudly to Mom. Judging by her love for Dad, I knew she would agree with me too. When Mom heard this, she immediately said, yes. Usually, although I'm timid, I can't tolerate anything that happens to Nathaniel. Lila, let's go and call the police together. Just as Mom and I walked to the door, Dad suddenly let out an ouch and then fell into a coma. Mom rushed over hurriedly. Nathaniel, what's wrong with you? I'll take you to the hospital. Sister-in-law, let's take brother Nathaniel to the hospital for treatment first. With just one sentence, Hannah led Mom's thoughts astray again. Mom quickly agreed and then carried Dad to the hospital with her. Hannah, Dad, do you think you're so smart? Just wait. I still have my trump card to play. After arriving at the hospital, Dad woke up. The doctor told my mother and me that he had a sudden onset of cancer. Mom's tears burst out again in an instant. She begged the doctor to cure Dad no matter what. Looking behind Mom, I saw a flash of smugness in the eyes of Dad and Hannah. So I decided to release the secretly filmed video immediately. The heat of Dad's funeral hadn't died down yet, and when I released this video, it caused an even bigger stir. In the video, Dad climbed out of the coffin, complaining about the cold. There was also what Hannah said about putting the dummy in. It directly refuted what she had said before, that Dad's body had been stolen. Everyone knew that she had been lying at that time. All along, she had been conspiring with Dad to fake his death. The internet was full of curses directed at Hannah and Dad. One plot twist isn't enough, there's even a second one. It's really shocking. It turns out that Nathaniel faked his death himself. But what was his purpose? Why would he fake his death? And he also conspired with that Hannah. Guys, it's found out. Hannah is Nathaniel's first love. The two of them should have planned to elope, so they faked his death. Things were finally getting closer to the truth step by step. I seemed to see the dawn of victory. After seeing all this, Mom immediately went to question Dad. Dad, however, started crying and said, I knew I was dying of cancer, so I deliberately faked my death, wanting to prepare you and our daughter psychologically. I also asked Hannah and Sebastian to help me act out this play. Hannah also chimed in beside him, yes, sister-in-law. Although brother Nathaniel and I had a relationship in the past, now that his daughter is so grown up, how could I possibly interfere in your relationship? People on the internet are all making up stories. Brother Nathaniel loves you very much. Even on his deathbed, he was still thinking about your feelings. After hearing this, Mom was moved. Really, is that true? I really didn't expect them to be so shameless. They could actually come up with such a reason to deceive Mom. Of course it's true, honey. I really love you. Before, I was afraid you'd be angry, so I didn't tell you. Actually, Sebastian and Hannah are both good people. Could you post a statement on the internet later and tell netizens that it was all a misunderstanding? Mom immediately nodded. Of course I can. You're all good people. I'll definitely clarify it. Mom loved Dad so much that she would always choose to believe whatever he said. I wouldn't directly say that Dad was lying at this time. That would only make Mom hate me. So, I could only think of other ways. After Mom went to buy food for Dad, Hannah and Dad stared at me closely. Dad was the first to speak. Was it you who posted that video on the internet? I immediately forced out some tears. Yes, it was me who posted it. You woke me up that day. I heard your conversation and thought you were going to elope with Aunt Hannah. But it's all explained clearly now, Dad. I misunderstood you. After hearing this, Dad's stern expression softened a bit. Damn girl, I'm your father. We're a family. You can't do this again in the future. I'll reluctantly forgive you this time. Hearing the words, we're a family, from his mouth made me feel extremely ironic. In my previous life, my mother and I found out that he was still alive and saw that he and Hannah even had a child. When Mom went to find him, not only did he show no guilt, but he also stabbed my mother and me to death with the butcher knife he used most often. At that time, I was spitting blood and kept calling him Dad. However, he cut my throat with one stroke and killed me completely. I hated him to the core. After leaving the ward, I sat on the chair in the corridor and tried hard to recall the events of my previous life. I remembered that in my previous life, when I saw Dad and Hannah's daughter, she should have been in primary school. Calculating according to the time, Hannah was about to get pregnant soon. That is to say, she and Dad were bound to have big moves recently. Thinking of this, I went to find Mom and asked her to let me arrange the matter of posting this statement. Dad, Hannah, you think your plan is perfect, don't you? But I'll find loopholes in it. In the following days, Mom went to deliver meals to Dad every day and then went to work. While I hid in the dark and found that Hannah only went to see Dad after Mom left, seeing her enter the ward, I immediately rushed to the door and secretly filmed everything inside with my mobile phone. As soon as Hannah went in, she sat on Dad's lap. Brother Nathaniel, I miss you so much. Dad put his arm around her waist and kissed her on the cheek. Baby, I miss you too. Then he turned over and pinned Hannah under him. I almost vomited at the sight of it. Mom worked hard to earn money to let Dad stay in a single ward. But he was having an affair with his lover instead. Mom would be so sad if she saw this. I really felt sorry for her. She had devoted her whole life to a man, but ended up like this. I thought Hannah would go home after having an affair with Dad. But unexpectedly, after leaving Dad, she went to find Sebastian. I rubbed my eyes several times and looked carefully to confirm that the man hugging Hannah at the stairway was indeed Sebastian. At this moment, Sebastian was stroking Hannah's hair. Baby, when can you get Nathaniel's money? Hannah's eyes dodged. Soon. When I get the money, I'll dump him and elope with you. Oh my God. There were twists and turns again and again, and each one was more shocking than the last. But I was sure that Hannah would definitely not elope with Sebastian. After all, in my previous life, she had always been with Dad. Thinking of this, a more perfect plan came to my mind. Recently, Dad had been urging Mom to post the statement. Mom came to urge me, and I told her that I would post the statement in the evening. After all, everything was ready now. In the evening, I specially invited all our relatives to our home. Mom asked me why, and I told her that it was to let them come and clarify to netizens together how much Dad loved her. Mom believed me and even praised me for being sensible. Soon I would make Mom completely wake up. When Dad heard that I had invited relatives, he and Hannah also rushed back from the hospital. Facing the relatives sitting in the living room, I started a live stream. In an instant, everyone was looking at the camera obediently. I smiled and said, "Hello, everyone. I'm Nathaniel's daughter. There have been a lot of rumors on the internet recently because of my father's funeral. I want to give an explanation today." With that, I turned to look at Dad. Dad, can I talk about it? At this moment, he still showed a gratified smile to me. Of course, daughter. Go ahead. Okay. After getting the response, I immediately took out my tablet and played a video. Brother Nathaniel, I miss you so much. A female voice came from the tablet. My dad and Hannah's pupils suddenly shrank and they panicked. Lila, what are you playing? Dad roared and wanted to rush over to grab the tablet. But I skillfully dodged him and pointed the tablet at the live stream camera. My dad is an out-and-out scumbag. He faked his death in order to elope with his first love. Moreover, he was in debt up to his neck and just wanted to leave these debts to my mother and me. Everyone, please watch this video carefully. With a slap, Hannah suddenly rushed up and slapped me. Damn girl. If you keep talking nonsense, I'll tear your mouth apart. Great. Keep it up like this. Soon you'll be cursed to death by netizens. I'll just say it. I also know that you and Sebastian are in a boyfriend-girlfriend relationship, right? As soon as I said this, Dad's face turned pale. Lila, what are you talking about? And Mom, looking at the video on the tablet, burst into tears. Lila, tell Mom what the truth is. I curled my lips into a smile and played another video on the tablet. It was the scene of Sebastian and Hannah hugging each other in the stairwell. And they were talking about cheating Dad out of his money. After Dad saw it, his face became extremely gloomy and he stared closely at the flustered Hannah. What do you mean? Didn't we agree that after I faked my death, you would stay with me for the rest of my life? Hannah took a step back, her voice trembling. No, it's not like that, Brother Nathaniel. Let me explain. Damn it. I really can't stand it anymore. Calling you Brother Nathaniel over and over again is so disgusting. Suddenly, my aunt rushed up and slapped Hannah. Seeing this, the others also rushed up. They cursed her one after another. So you're the mistress all along. Damn it. How cheap. Some relatives couldn't stand it and even beat Dad together. Beast. Amelia has been with you for half her life. Is this how you treat her? Yes. Amelia was sincere to you, but you were thinking of eloping with someone else. Stop hitting. Dad begged desperately for mercy, and Hannah was also crying and begging for mercy. Grandma went to pull them apart but couldn't separate those relatives at all. Most of these relatives were from Mom's side. Now that they saw Dad cheating, of course, they couldn't sit still. I turned to look at Mom. Her eyes were red, and she looked at Dad with a desperate expression. Nathaniel, I want a divorce. Finally, I heard these words. I had done so many things in such a roundabout way just to make Mom give up on him and take the initiative to ask for a divorce. And the cheating party would leave the house with nothing. I let out a sigh of relief. After being reborn, although the journey was thrilling and full of obstacles. But now that I've come this far, I feel a great sense of accomplishment. Because it was all thanks to me that I got revenge on Dad and Hannah. It felt so good. After that day, the reputations of my father and Hannah were completely ruined on the internet. Everyone in the whole Jiangqing knew how despicable the things these two scoundrels had done were. As for Sebastian, he was fired by the hospital. And because he issued death certificates randomly, he was also fined. Moreover, since this incident had caused such a big stir, he couldn't find a job anywhere. He could only ask Hannah for money every day and harass her constantly. If she didn't give him money, he would beat her. However, after being abandoned by my father, Hannah had no money to use either, so she could only work as a hostess in a bar. But because some people recognized her, not only did they not let her accompany them for drinks, but they also got someone to teach her a lesson. She went home with a bruised face. But when she got home, since she had no money to give to Sebastian, she would be beaten by him again. Some people saw this scene, took pictures of her miserable state and posted them on the internet. Everyone said that this was her karma. She deserved it for breaking up other people's families. I also thought it was her karma. I remembered very clearly that in my previous life, because of her, my mother and I not only paid off debts for 10 years, but in the end, because of her instigation, my father killed us. So how could such a vicious person escape karma? As for my father, after this incident came to light, when he went to sell meat in the vegetable market, he was even beaten by the aunties with vegetable leaves. They cursed him as a beast and refused to buy his meat. Having nowhere to go, he could only come to find Mom and beg her to forgive him. However, after the last incident, Mom seemed to have become a different person. She was no longer a lovesick fool and no longer blindly devoted herself to Dad. She began to spend money on herself and me. She paid for me to enroll in many tutoring classes and urged me to study hard. She also bought a lot of accident insurance policies for herself and filled in my name as the beneficiary. On this day, she took me out for dinner and we saw Dad downstairs. Dad looked haggard. He walked over and begged for forgiveness from my mother and me. But Mom angrily slapped him. Get lost. My daughter and I don't need you. Dad's face was full of pain. I'm sorry. I was just confused for a moment before. And it was Hannah who seduced me. I'm begging you. Forgive me. I don't want a divorce from you. It seemed that every person who made mistakes would say that they were just confused for a moment afterwards. But they clearly knew that what they had done at that time was wrong, yet they still chose to do it. They knew it was wrong but still did it. How could they still delude themselves into thinking that they could be forgiven? Nathaniel, you know what? I feel sick just looking at you now. I wish you were dead. Mom looked at him with disgust on her face. It doesn't matter if you don't agree to the divorce. I've already sued you. With that, Mom took me and left. I asked Mom, have you let go of Dad this time? She looked at the sunset on the horizon and sighed. Actually, I didn't love your father before. I fell in love with him when I gave birth to you. At that time, only he didn't dislike me. He helped me with everything when I was in confinement, even dealing with the most unpleasant things. I thought that since he was willing to do such things for me, he must love me deeply. So I was also very good to him, and we were really affectionate before. But I forgot that people's hearts can change. With that, she wiped away her tears and smiled at me. Lila, now I just want to be happy with you every day. We can buy whatever we want, eat delicious food, wear nice clothes and live in a good place every day. Speaking of this, her voice choked up and her hand trembled as she stroked my face. Daughter, we don't have to live frugally anymore in the future. At this moment, I realized that she had also come back. I hugged her tightly and my mind was filled with memories of my previous life. At that time, in order to pay off the debts, both she and I not only had to work at our regular jobs but also took part-time jobs after work. We lived in a dilapidated rental house every day and didn't even dare to buy meat to eat. We shouldn't have lived such a life. But because of Dad, that selfish person, he ruined our lives. Fortunately, God gave us a chance to be reborn and allowed us to change this tragic ending. Later, Mom's lawsuit was successful and she divorced Dad successfully. Moreover, because of Dad's affair, he left the house with nothing and all his debts were transferred to him. Because these were the debts he had incurred by himself when he was young. But he had no ability to repay them at all and was beaten by debt collectors every day. The next time I saw him was on the news. The reporter reported that he blamed Hannah for ruining everything for him. He took a butcher knife and killed her, and then cut his own throat with one stroke. The two of them went to the underworld together. Grandma couldn't accept Dad's death and followed them, while my mother and I, based on the memories of our previous life, bought a lot of lottery tickets. And I, who hadn't even gone to university yet, had already become a multimillionaire,